to his pronouncement of death. You'll die in that day. So it was within that 1,000-year period.
Right, in 2 Peter, it talks about that.
Was true.
Right, and so the dying process was just that. It was a process. It wasn't he was going to be struck down dead, but the process of dying was going to begin. Again, he was going to be returning to the ground. Now, we talked about all of the consequences. Now, remember the scriptures that we read about Lazarus?
Yes.
What was happening to Lazarus when he was in the tomb for 4 days?
He was decaying.
He was returning to the elements.
That's right.
That's exactly what was happening. He was returning to the elements just like it was prophesied would happen to Adam. So the reason we started out with the Lazarus event was because it was an event that happened thousands of years later that really shows the process of death. And again, well, what is it? Let's do it this way. What does it mean to die? What does it mean to die? It means to die. Aha, how about that? I know it's deep. Can you handle it?
I can't. It's too early.
Okay, well, that's what the word literally means. In the Old Testament, the word for die means
to die.
To die. Now, when something dies, when a plant dies, what does that mean? There's no longer life in it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're cultivating a plant and it dies, you throw it out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. It decays. It breaks down.
Right. That's what the word actually literally means. And again, now we're talking about this in the context of Halloween because there's a great contradiction here. The pagan ritual is to communicate with the dead. Okay? Here, what we're saying is based on the Old Testament definition and understanding.
You can't talk to the dead.
Right. Well, because certainly they won't listen.
Because they're not able to.
Right. They're not capable of listening. Thus the theme scripture, the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more reward. Even the memory of them is lost. So in looking at this, it becomes a very important distinction in terms of our beliefs and where they go. Let's take a look at a couple of scriptures that use this word for die in the Old Testament. Die. It sounds so ominous. It really does.
Let's read 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 5. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life.
Okay, so it talked about restoring a dead body to life. So that's one of the uses of this word for die in the Old Testament. How about another one?
Job 14, verse 14. If a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait, till my change come. Okay,
he's asking a question. If a man dies, will he live again? He's not saying, well, we die and we continue in our lives. And I think, Jonathan, I think that's the biggest distinction that needs to be clarified. In the very beginning, there was no intimation or indication or words from God that said death is merely a changeover point. Okay? That's not what it said. It didn't say death was a changeover point. It said death was a stopping point. And it was a process. One of the most depressing things I think I've ever heard is that, the moment you're born, you start to die. It's like, great! Did you have to remind me of that now? And the point is that death, I think, in the scriptures is very clearly a point of stopping the cessation of life. And I think it has a universal definition. I don't think die means continuing on for humankind, but death for an animal or a plant. You follow me? It's not a stopping point for one and a continuation for another. I just don't, I can't see how that fits. Let's take a look at a few other scriptures. And folks, if you have a thought, it's 860. Well, that's right. Fred's saying, not now, Rick. Well, anyway, 442-6102. Call next hour. How's that, Fred? Okay.
Let's read Psalms 115, verse 17. The dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence.
Okay, so it's giving I think a kind of a graphic description. And again, one of the things that you look at is we're talking about this in the context of Halloween, and we're talking about this in the context of those who are looking to communicate with the dead. And we're saying, well, that really doesn't fit with the reality that we're understanding here.
Ecclesiastes 9, verse 5.
And that's our theme text.
For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything, neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten.
Okay. Now there's another word in the Old Testament for death. And the word for die meant die, and the word for death means death. Yes, we are really deep and profound this morning. We may have gotten an extra hour of sleep, but it doesn't show.
Oh, yes.
All right, so let's take a look at that, just how that's used in a few places in the Old Testament as well.
Numbers 16, verse 29. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me.
Okay, so die the common death of all man. Moses was talking about dying old age, okay, versus being taken in a catastrophe. That's what he was saying there. So, but he's saying die the common death of all men. Go to the ending of their lives, so to speak.
Ecclesiastes 10, verse 1. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So doth a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor.
I love that scripture, Jonathan, because it talks about dead flies. And I don't know that, well, maybe there are some of us, but I don't know that any of us look at flies as having a the death of a fly is a rejoicing because it's a launching point to another life. You follow me?
I do.
Okay. When a fly dies, it's dead, it's gone, it's done, it's finished, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the same word describes what happens to flies as what happens to men in that previous scripture in Numbers. Next one.
Psalm 6:5. For in death there is no remembrance of thee, in the grave who shall give thee thanks?
Okay, there's no remembrance, who gives thanks? One more.
Deuteronomy 21:22. And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree.
Okay, so there were sins worthy of death. Now, does that mean there were sins worthy of going to a kickoff point to another life, or were they worthy of the stoppage of their current life? You see,
The latter.
Right. Going back through this, when God said, in the day that you eat of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die, there was a proclamation that things weren't going to continue in a good way. Now, this raises the question, well, what about the soul? In the second hour, we're going to spend a lot of time on the soul, because when you have things happening not only within the pagan traditions but within Christianity in terms of communicating with dead souls, we got to say, well, what does that mean and how does it all fit? For Jonathan and Rick, this is Christian Questions. Is Halloween happy? We'll be back in the second hour, but until then, think about it.